In today's homework video, we will be discussing the events of Shays Rebellion and how it demonstrated the failure of the Articles of Confederation. Title your notes, Shays Rebellion, and follow along by copying down the notes color-coded in purple on the following slides. Be sure to listen to the stories and information as well, because I will be asking you to draw a few sketches beside your notes that will prove to me that you actually watched and listened to this homework video. So let's get started. The four guiding questions we will be answering in the homework video are: 1. How were the lives of those living in the United States affected after the Revolutionary War? How were the people living in the United States governed during the Revolutionary War and immediately after it? 3. What were the Articles of Confederation? 4. How did this government lead to the creation of the Constitution that we have today? The Americans had fought long and hard for 8 long years during the Revolutionary War, and amazingly, they had won. They had won their independence from England. At first glance, you might assume that the colonists were completely thrilled. The end of the war, hooray! Everything is happily ever after. But you'd actually be wrong. Yes, it's exciting that the 13 colonies were no longer under the control of Great Britain, but your life as a colonist now has new challenges to face. Draw a soldier returning home after the war, and imagine you are that revolutionary soldier in the army. The fighting is over. What do you imagine life will be like when you get home? What will you do? What will it be like? So what really happened after the war? Well, the newly formed American government did not have any money of its own, so it had no real money to pay its soldiers for fighting in the Revolutionary War. The government obviously wanted to pay their patriots something, so they printed paper money that had no real value and was basically worthless. That means that when these soldiers got home to their farms, they had nothing to bring back to their families and nothing to use to replant crops with and rebuild their farms that they'd left. Many of the veteran soldiers were now farmers who could not support their families and were going broke. Sure, they had been heroes, but they had nothing to show for it. Draw an empty pocketbook, or empty pockets in a pair of pants, or a bag of money with an X through it to show this idea next to your notes. And if you think that was bad, it got even worse. You see, many of the veteran soldiers were in debt. They owed people in their community money. Some of them even owed money to their local governments. In Massachusetts, the local judges told the indebted farmers that they had to sell their property to pay their debts. Since local judges were the ones who intervened in money situations in villages and towns across the colonies, they enforced the laws for the most part. These Massachusetts farmers had to sell their land, their homes, and their livestock, anything they owned of relative value. Draw a local judge with his white wig demanding farmers sell their land to pay their debt. Can you imagine coming back home after a long, hard war, having no money at all, and then being told by a judge that you no longer can own your farm and have to sell it and use that money to pay debt that you owed? Keep in mind, farms were the main way that people made their money to survive back then. So, when a farmer sold his farm, he no longer had a job and a way to make money and provide for his family. Consider how enraged, heartbroken, and desperate these veteran soldiers felt. One enraged Massachusetts farmer was a man by the name of Daniel Shays. He had been a hero from the Battle of Bunker Hill and had fought in the Revolutionary War for the Patriots. He was so angry about the situation that he led a band of angry farmers in an attempt to shut down the courthouse and seize the weapons from the local militia arsenal in order to revolt against the government and take a violent stand against what was happening to them. They wanted to be paid real money for their contributions to the Continental Army. They wanted to keep their land, and they wanted to be able to make a living back home. They were going to fight for it, same way they had fought for their independence just a few years earlier. So what ends up happening? Well, Shays' men are on a rampage in an attempt to capture the federal arsenal at Springfield. In the process, they harass leading merchants, lawyers, and supporters of the state government. Massachusetts has a state militia, and with this group of soldiers, they are sent to go fight back Shays' men and stop them. The state militia fights back in several skirmishes over the winter months of 1787. Draw a quick sketch of the Massachusetts militia putting down the uprising of Shays' Rebellion. Over time, Shays' men start to realize they are losing these mini battles, including men, supplies, and ammunition, so they quit trying to capture the arsenal, protest through violence, and retreat, running away to Rhode Island and then Vermont, where the militia quits pursuing them. The question became, was Shays' Rebellion a national threat to the brand new United States government? You could say in some ways yes, and in other ways no. It did shed light on a growing major problem, and that was the way that America's government was being run and the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation was the first form of government written during the American Revolution for the 13 colonies to establish the powers of the new national government. But in many ways, it fragmented the colonies from one another that was in desperate need of being amended or fixed. The Articles of Confederation were like a sinking ship with no power to collect taxes, no power to raise an army, no power to enforce laws, no national court system, and no power to enforce treaties. With its many obvious problems adding up, the Articles of Confederation kept accumulating more and more leaks in the ship's hull. It was going down, and there was nothing to stop it. Draw your own version of this sinking ship cartoon of the Articles of Confederation next to your notes. Shays' Rebellion helped America see that, and now was the time to make those necessary changes to the United States governing document so that future problems and threats like Shays' Rebellion would not happen again. You see, under the Articles of Confederation, the national government had no army anymore. They had sent Continental soldiers home after the war. And because of this, there really was no national way to stop these farmers. Shays and his men essentially rebelled for 5 months until the Massachusetts militia was able to put an end to the conflict. These events made it clear that the United States needed a stronger national government. 3 months after the end of the rebellion, representatives from all 13 states met in Philadelphia to decide what to do next. We know this meeting to be the Constitutional Convention. Initially, the representatives showed up with the expectation to fix the broken Articles of Confederation, but they left having changed their entire system of government completely. And this effective government system is what we still have today, known as the U.S. Constitution, the law of the land.